When I say the baddest, I mean the actual, literal worst. This was the Rocky Mountain ATV MC Budget Bike Adventure Challenge, and it was 1,000 hilarious miles on an old, decrepit death trap. This video is just my supplementary addition to the real $1,000 Bike Adventure Challenge videos, which are available on the Rocky Mountain ATV MC channel right here on YouTube. Make sure you queue up the actual series before you click off this video because trust me, you won't want to miss it. So how did I find myself struggling along aboard such a ripe turd for a 1,000-mile ride? Well, allow me to take you through that sequence of events from my perspective. Rewind to early this year when I had just acquired the XR600R and made it dirt-worthy. I was out in the southern Utah area doing the little bit of testing on it that I had time to do, and the thing was pretty much great. I had broken some things on the bike during the testing, but it was still just going to make such an excellent platform, and I couldn't help but think, dang, this is my year. This is when it all comes together for me. I mean, if I did so well last year on a DR200, I'll be absolutely dangerous this year on the XR600. It was absolutely looking like a high point in my life. I was driving back from that testing on the XR600, stopped for gas, and just happened to notice an email on my phone titled Rocky Mountain ATV MC Collaboration. I don't even open most emails I get, but as a smaller sized content creator, that's an email that you don't ignore. Hey Gabe, it's Wes with Rocky Mountain. Hey, I'm just reaching out. We're working on a new and exciting video series, and based on your content, you like riding old crappy bikes, and that is exactly what we've got going on in this one. So it's riding adventure bikes through some gnarly terrain, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So yeah, we actually had one of our riders crash out and is not able to come with us. And so we've got a spare bike, and I think it's got your name on it if you are willing. So yeah, just wanted to reach out and see if you would want to come with us. So give me a call back. We'll talk to you soon. When I read that, I was like, hold the heck up, homie. Is this even real? I verified that it was real. This seemed incredible still. I immediately checked my calendar, and of course, I had work threatening to get in the way of the proposed dates. I was about to be sad that I couldn't go, but instead I said, screw it, I'm an adult, and I do what I want. I swiftly replied with a yes, and resolved to live with whatever consequences may arise. A few days later, with the ride rapidly approaching, I talked to Chancellor and got a few more details on the ride. One of those details was that the bike I would be on was a sweet 1982 Suzuki SP500. 1982 and Suzuki was all I needed to hear to get excited. But what the heck is an SP500? I looked online and found that it's the street-oriented variant of the DR500. That should be a fine machine for putting along to cover 1,000 miles, I thought. And it really should, for putting along. So as far as I could tell, this was really happening. I made ready the Forerunner and hauled my ass to Mesquite where the adventure would begin. In Mesquite, I met the whole crew. Chancellor and his non-BMW GS.
1982 Suzuki GS 650. We should have him vote on which bike he likes better. So, old street bike, 4 cylinders. I do have some underglow, but I can change whatever
RGB.
color I want. Yeah, special remote. I ended up having to do a top end on this bike.
A top end on that thing?
I had to do a top end on this thing.
Oh man, how was that?
For $250. It had been sitting for 27 years.
What?
So,
Wes and his visually appealing Ninja.
Some describe it as sexy.
How much was the bike to begin with?
Guess. I just want you to guess how much I paid for the bike.
$350.
$275. And it was running on starting fluid, but missing parts in the carburetor.
Justin and his comfortable KZ. So what do we got over there?
81 KZ 440.
Eric and his massive smoke show. Charles and his oil-thirsty XL600, the unsung heroes of the Rocky Mountain channel, Kobe, Josh, and Ethan of the camera crew, and of course, the rescue vehicle operator, Nick. That night, I was able to get a short test run in on the SP500.
okay?
Oh yeah, totally okay.
1,000 miles okay?
Around the parking lot okay, so. It was functional at least, although I was surprised that it had noticeably less power than the DR200 which I had recently raced. It wasn't a thorough test that I did by any means, and it was too dark to see the finer details that the bike offered. It would turn out that there were things that would have been nice to address before setting off, but I felt that no amount of issues would cancel my ride on the SP500 after finding out what the punishment would be for not completing the ride on your budget bike. So last night when we went to dinner, I learned that they brought a great incentive to not break down on your junker bike. If you break down on those sweet things, you would actually have the punishment of getting stuck on this heaping pile. When I found out about the cruel punishment of the white KTM, the stage was perfectly set. A great challenge was ahead, with grave consequences for failure. Before setting off that morning, I got more acquainted with the SP500 and learned that it had some intricacies. Okay, I have no clue how this petcock works. It looks like just a blob of JB Weld. Is that what it is?
That is exactly what it is.
Okay.
So it was broken off originally. Draw a small little pinhole, put a little wire in there, and then mold some JB Weld around.
Nice.
So this is aimed, that's reserve.
Okay.
Off and then on.
Okay.
It functions really well.
Some of my favorite SP500 features were the gaping hole in the head, which was blasted full of silicone sealant, but which still gushed oil constantly, the JB Weld petcock knob, the turn signals, which were only visible during a 12 o'clock wheelie, the custom 2-can hybrid exhaust, the fuel cap held together exclusively by Gorilla Glue, and the mysterious knocking noise. The bike would also leak quite a bit of fuel out of the carburetor and would be hard to start after sitting on the side stand, evidence of float issues. The Kickstarter generally kicked through with very little resistance, but it would occasionally kick back in the most pathetic way I've ever seen. The XR600, which I'd just acquired, would sound like a sharp, high-pressure gas discharge when it would kick back, and it would do so with enough force to throw me off the bike. This SP500 would just make a plonk noise, and the kickback was slow and unbelievably gentle. Still, I thought for sure it would be just fine. We all loaded up and started the adventure. Hilarity ensued immediately. The SP500 was a constant smoke show from oil leaking out of the top end and onto the exhaust pipe. The bike would surge and sputter randomly, making it difficult or impossible to just cruise at a constant pace. It would leave puddles of oil anywhere I parked it. And of course, on the freeway, it required full throttle and full tuck just to stay above 60 miles per hour and not get flattened by angry Karens slingshotting around what must have been the most disgusting group of ragtag motorcyclists they'd ever seen. It wasn't long before the SP500 gave us the first real scare of the trip. We stopped for fuel just outside of Mesquite, and the SP500 refused to start up again. We took turns kicking, trying various starting rituals, until finally something worked and it just complied. There we go. Alright, we're in business. The SP continued to function to some degree for several minutes, until Josh, riding behind me at that moment, mentioned that the SP was pouring tons of fluid out. Oh, it's really coming out. Maybe if we just hit this thing a little. It's still coming out, isn't it? Oh no, it's dying. Holy crap. Oh, now it's coming out my... Okay. Let's see what happens. The float bowl on the SP was overflowing with fuel badly, and our attempts to unstick the floats without pulling the carburetor were useless. Probably because the floats actually weren't sticking. They were filled with fuel, and doing nothing at all to regulate the fuel flow into the bowl. Repairs were attempted, and it turned into a disaster which almost resulted in the SP500 being loaded into the rescue van and replaced with the white KTM.
Oh, there's
The fumes inside there are popping the solder out.
Well, that's one way to get it out.
Yeah. Let's burn all them fumes out first.
Holy crap.
Oh, I can fix that. The solder got hot there.
There we go. I'll fix it.
Hold on. Ultimately, through the force of the collective willpower of our group and a lump of JB Weld, the SP500's carburetor was made functional and we continued on. No white KTM needed. My confidence in the SP500, however, was seriously shaken. I realized then just how real the threat of failure was, and just how quickly this whole thing could turn into a ride of shame aboard that thing. Hitting the first real bit of off-road was a shock that I'll never forget. I've done some riding with a fully loaded bike before, but never really like this. We were all loaded with enough gear to camp off the bikes for several days in a row, so the luggage was pretty dang heavy. That's no problem when you're cruising on the road or even just riding trails at a leisurely pace, but that was not this. We had to cover 1,000 miles, and we didn't have unlimited time to do it, so we had to keep a decent pace no matter how washed out and rough the trails got. I was amazed with how effortlessly the Rocky Mountain guys slung those heavy, loaded old bikes around. It looked like child's play to them, like just another day on a dirt bike. Yet they were mostly on straight-up street bikes. It was simply amazing. Meanwhile, I was aboard my own personal struggle bus because I had no clue what I was doing, and the weight of my luggage flailing about as I tried to figure it out only felt like random shifts in the Earth's gravity that I seemingly couldn't account for, and which constantly tried to slam me face first into the ground. I kept the throttle wide open much of the time, just to maintain what seemed like maybe 30 miles per hour. The SP required a downshift for the slightest inclines, and moderate pea gravel sapped the power as if it were deep sugar sand. I was having an absolute blast, as there was never a dull moment in such an unfamiliar situation. But I was working that SP hard, and judging by the sound of the engine, it was tired before I even got on it. To top it off, the SP ran out of fuel every 50 miles, like clockwork. I constantly had to borrow fuel from everyone else or be rescued by Nick in the van. I even had to refuel mid-log crossing while we were playing around at Jimmy Lewis's place. This was going to be a long, hard slog for the poor little SP, and as I realized that, I really started to make peace with the possibility of swinging a leg over the white KTM. However, as we started off the third day of riding, I immediately felt that things were different. Maybe it was my brain adapting to the all-new, loaded SP500 sensations, or maybe it was the small microdoses of KTM tears that the SP500 had experienced along the way, actually causing it to transform into a better bike. Whatever it was, I quickly started to flow on the trails a lot smoother, with a lot less struggle. We started really moving through those desert trails, and I felt myself carrying enough speed to glide over the bumps instead of smashing through them. Riding the SP was already a good time when I had zero control, and finally getting in tune with it and blasting around just like it was any other dirt bike made it an even better time, because it felt like I had really accomplished something. I had tamed the beast, and it had become an extension of myself. This adaptation came just in time for a time trial race against the other bikes. Alright, this is where we find out how much faster the SP is than all these other bikes.
I lost some luggage.
The little SP still had its fair share of issues going forward, but we handled everything in stride, kept dumping fuel and oil into it, and the SP just kept thumping along. Eventually, we had fixed up the bike so well that its reputation switched from being the problem bike to being the reliable bike that just needs fuel often. That old SP500 had little compression, little power, knocked and rattled like a jackhammer, and I think, objectively, overall, was still a massive piece of junk, but I'll be darned if that thing didn't do the job just fine and allow me to have one of the best times of my life. It even did some things really well, like how the ABS-like drum brakes even saved my ass when we were coming across a frozen pass. Ultimately, the SP500 was successful in covering the 1,000-mile route. Unfortunately, I cannot give you the joy of that ride. No amount of storytelling or imagery, even if it were a total masterpiece, better than any movie you've ever seen, could even come close to relating a tenth of the value of that ride. But I do want to share something that I've taken away from that ride, and it's a little more significant than just, hey, you can do whatever you want on a crap bike. Although that is pretty much true, and that is really valuable to understand, I found a lot of value on top of that when I looked back on this ride. In case you haven't kept up with the channel, I've recently been faced with quite a challenge. An injury I sustained has drastically altered my ability to perform on a dirt bike. Remember at the beginning of this video I mentioned that I was in a great place, finally in a position to accomplish my racing goals, and in general just take this channel, which is a huge part of my life now, to new heights. Well, at my most recent race, I found out that the injury was still keeping me down after months of recovery, and at this point in time, it's looking like it very well could be a permanent hindrance. Permanent degradation of your body could be devastating, no matter what your situation is. Someone in my position who thought they were about to achieve their goals just to get a smackdown from life that says, actually that's not going to happen this year, and odds are it never will, could absolutely allow such a thing to ruin them. Why do I not even care then? Why have I not dragged myself down into a depressive state after this huge shift in the prospects of my goals? It's actually largely from looking back on this ride. The SP500 was this sad, trashed old machine that had to become my vehicle in accomplishing a rather difficult challenge. It had to become the extension of myself that would move me through the physical obstacles from the start point to the 1,000-mile mark. Even though it was run down, had issues, and needed some special attention, it accomplished the goal. And it didn't just make it either. It made it while providing me with one of the most joyous experiences that I've ever had. And when I think about this, I realized that my body is also a vehicle for myself, just like any bike. And right now, with the injury that I have, maybe it doesn't quite perform like a factory 450 race bike. Maybe instead I'm just rocking more like your average showroom floor 250, and maybe it'll never be performing perfectly well again. But even if all that is truly the case, well then I'm cool with that, because I know that even when this thing is totally wrecked, worn out, fugly and roached, the human equivalent of our beloved SP500, I'll still be able to accomplish great things and smash through goals with it. I'll always be able to adapt to it, apply band-aid fixes as necessary, and in general, just figure out ways to keep doing everything just fine. Hey guys, to catch the whole 1,000-mile adventure, head over to the Rocky Mountain ATV MC channel. Click the card. Hey! As I was finishing up editing that video, I just couldn't help but feel that it would be such a shame if Rocky Mountain didn't want to keep the SP500, because I worried that it may fall into the wrong hands, you know, just someone who might just thrash on it and run it into the ground and not treat it like the legendary bike that it is. And unfortunately that has actually happened, because I now own the bike.